who will watch the watchman, or as might be the case in a more law-abiding country, who has the legal permission or authority to watch the watchman? That's a conundrum that we regularly find ourselves in when you are in a society. If you're in a society, someone has to be there to, have that authority to look over things, to keep things secure. They have certain extra authorities in the society, but if you give people that extra authority, how do you make sure that they don't abuse it? And in our style of societies, we have laws that are written to try to make sure these things don't happen. You have laws that you write there to try to ensure that anyone given that extra bit of authority isn't able to abuse it at the same time. But yet still we end up in that position on a regular. So not too long ago, there was some quite a bit of a furor raised about the firearm users' licenses, and that was something under the purview of the Commissioner of Police. And back then, the Commissioner of Police was one Mr. Gary Griffith here in Trinidad and Tobago, and that whole issue had a lot of bacchanal. It held the entire country in a bit of confusion for probably still continuing till now, if we're being honest. And some of this started from an investigation that was launched by the National Security Council. That's a group that includes several parliamentarians, and they were the ones who initially launched this investigation, hiring some retired police officers, etc., etc. Now, the results of that investigation are under legal challenge because that former commissioner is saying that he does not want those results published in Parliament. He does not want those results to go public. And it could seem curious. Why would you not want the results of an investigation to go public? It could make it seem like, you have the proverbial cocoa in the sun. You have something that you want to hide. We'll see exactly what he wants to hide or why he doesn't want that to go public if the people who made that investigation had the authority to do so and then make it public, or if it was just a political technique to find a way to go around the regular legal avenue to do things so that you could get a political attack in. We'll dive into that and see exactly what's going on. And also with that, there was recently, I read it in a live, we did that story in a live, where a man recently won $200,000 from the state, awarded $200,000 over some really grievous harm that was brought to him at the hands of the prosecutorial arm of the state, in particular law enforcement, and to quite some extent the court system too. And from that, there were questions raised about, do the police officers who engage in wrongful activity, do they have to pay the consequence themselves? Or is it something that the state would continue paying? And some people are saying that they would like to see some changes in that way, the officers themselves pay for it. And the officers had a response. We're going to get into all of that. Before we jump into these stories, hit that like button if you have not done that yet, and drop a comment at any time. Tell me what you think about this entire issue, if it makes sense to you, if it adds up, if you enjoy this kind of stuff. Comment that and tell me below. The comments and the likes really do help to push the video out there further on the algorithm. If you are not yet subscribed, now would be a good time to do that, and click the notification bell so you'd be sure to know whenever these videos drop. Okay, let's jump into this story. Griffith not comforted by assurances FUL audit report will not be made public. In less than 2 weeks, and unless an undertaking is given by the Prime Minister, the National Security Minister and the National Security Council, the High Court will give a date for its ruling on an injunction former Police Commissioner Gary Griffith is asking for to prevent the publication of the controversial firearm users license audit report in Parliament. On Wednesday, the first hearing since Griffith received the court's permission to challenge the decision of the Prime Minister, the members of his cabinet who sit on the NSC and 3 police officers who signed the report came up before Justice Devendra Rampasad. On October 28, Rampasad granted Griffith leave to pursue a judicial review claim challenging the legality of the setting up of the committee to do the audit and its investigation. Named in Mr. Griffith's lawsuit are the Prime Minister Dr. Rowley, former Attorney General Faris Al-Rawi, Ministers Fitzgerald Hines, Colm Imbert, Stuart Young, and Marvin Gonzalez as members of the NSC. They're all members of the National Security Council, as well as retired police officers Wellington Virgil, Raymond Craig, and Leonard Charles, who formed part of the audit team. So he has all of them in his lawsuit, all of them named. On Wednesday, the judge was expected to hear submissions to Griffith's injunction application, as well as one for the disclosure of the names of everyone involved in the audit. However, he asked the parties to discuss the possibility of an undertaking not to publish the report until Griffith's claim is determined. If no undertaking is given, then I will have to rule on the application. So he's trying to get the parties involved to, have this discussion outside of the court actually having to make a ruling, make a decision, see if you all can come to an amicable decision between yourselves so that we don't have to get involved. At a virtual hearing, Griffith's lead attorney, Avery Sinanan, senior counsel, said his client took no comfort in an assurance from Young that there was no intention to lay the report in Parliament, nor a danger of its being laid. And I could understand why you take no comfort in that. That would make sense, because there was some comfort given to Vincent Nelson King's counsel upon a deal made with this very same government that they, allegedly, that they wouldn't release his name and the specifics of what he confessed to international security agencies, particularly those in the United Kingdom where the man was living and working. And what would you know? That very same Mr. Stuart Young, allegations are that it was that very same minister that went back on that deal and sent the man's testimony over to the United Kingdom and got him in some trouble over there. So if you're making deals with the government, maybe Mr. Stuart Young might not be the ideal candidate to take the word of, just maybe, judging by some of the allegations out there floating. So the attorneys for Mr. Griffith are saying that, we understand that Mr. Stuart Young said they aren't going to lay it in Parliament, but that's not enough for us. That assurance isn't doing the work for us. The attorneys for the government side went on, though, to say that in his submissions, Martineau said, that's the attorney for the government side, as far as an undertaking is concerned, assurances have been given that it will not, under government authority or state authority, be published. He said those assurances have been given, although Mr. Griffith is saying those assurances aren't enough for him. The state was also told to put in another affidavit to address a suggestion that there were at least 5 other police officers involved in the audit, 4 of whom are unnamed and were allegedly appointed by the acting commissioner, and another whose name was disclosed as Brian Pay. The 3 retired officers named in Griffith's lawsuit and Pay signed the report. So Griffith, in his claim, he wants the name of everyone involved in that investigation. He wants all of their names revealed, because I suppose he wants to include them in the lawsuit too. Griffith wants the names of the other 4 officers alluded to in Young's affidavit, since Sinanan said the fact that only 4 signed did not exculpate the others from being involved in an illegal and unconstitutional act. And now we're getting into the crux of the matter. Why is it that Mr. Griffith is trying to sue all of those involved over this issue? It's an investigation into the firearm users' licenses. What is there to sue in there? Why does he want to do that? The NSC, we're going to get to this, the NSC is a subcommittee of Cabinet, and Cabinet has no constitutional authority to direct any investigation. He said without the statutory authority, Cabinet could not do what it did in setting up the audit committee and directing an investigation into the FUL process. And I could hear that argument. Cabinet would be the politicians involved in the cabinet of the prime minister, in the cabinet of the ruling government. These are politicians, elected officials, yes, but politicians. In how most countries are running, trying to, make sure things remain in a kind of fair scenario. How many countries are run is they try to make sure that politicians aren't too involved in the legal and judicial process for obvious reasons. This is kind of the same bacchanal that was around with the King's Counsel and the former Attorney General, because it could seem like the former Attorney General structured a deal all on his own to try to go after former political opponents. And you could understand why something like that would not seem all above board. And then now, if you have it that the cabinet politicians in the government are there signaling and ordering the start of an investigation into the commissioner of police, you could understand why something seems a bit suspicious there. Is it that we want in our society that the cabinet politicians have the authority to go in and launch investigations on the commissioner of police? Isn't that the purview of the commissioner of police? Isn't the commissioner of police supposed to be independent of the whole political process? And if it is that the cabinet has that kind of strong oversight, strong overreach over the commissioner of police, would that be something that goes against the whole intent of our constitution? That seems to be the argument being made here. The virus of this report is in question. This is the pit and gravamen of the complaint. Basically, the power, whether the cabinet had the power to launch this investigation, is the gravamen or the main crux of the issue here. Did the cabinet have authority to launch an investigation into the firearm users' licenses? And maybe in all of that, investigations could be done into why exactly the cabinet would take that position. Shouldn't this, don't we have other avenues to do these investigations? And criminal investigations supposed to be handled by the police? And if it's a criminal investigation of a police officer, shouldn't that be handled or sent to the police complaints authority, who may, in conjunction with the Standards Bureau, I believe it is, wouldn't they be in charge of investigating that? What position does the cabinet have? What position should they play in launching an investigation? And if they have launched that investigation and they have come to a conclusion based on that investigation, would that conclusion be an accurate one? And that's where the lawsuit that Mr. Griffith has already filed, that's the basis of that. And now, the conclusion of the investigation that the cabinet would have launched, they may want to lay that in Parliament. The problem with that is Parliament has parliamentary privilege. Griffith, who served as commissioner from 2018 to August 2021, said from his experience as a former national security minister, he knows neither the Prime Minister nor the National Security Council had the authority to appoint anyone to investigate the operations of the police service. So he was concerned about the legality of the audit committee's appointment. He also says he's concerned that the contents of the report and the process used by the committee were irretrievably tainted by bad faith and illegality. Because the Prime Minister has no power to appoint such a committee, and because of statements Dr. Rowley made after Griffith announced the launch of his political party and his decision to reapply to be top cop. Griffith also fears publication of the report or any part of it would expose him to public ridicule and, if laid in Parliament, would protect Rowley and the media by qualified or absolute privilege from defamation claims for damages. And therein lies the problem. You see, if indeed this report was illegal, they didn't have the permission to launch this report. And if indeed, as he claims, the report may be tainted by bad faith, and if the report was illegal, they didn't have the authority to do that, who has the oversight over it? If the oversight over it is political in nature, you could understand why assumptions could be made that the report may have some bad faith in it. It seems pretty obvious in the public discourse that the Prime Minister and the former Commissioner of Police aren't exactly close buddies. So you could understand why assumptions about bad faith could be understandable there. And if there is bad faith in that investigation, and the conclusion of that investigation is laid in Parliament, the privileges exercised in Parliament would mean that Mr. Griffith cannot sue anyone based on what may be bad faith. They could say anything they want. They could say this investigation concluded that the former Commissioner of Police was corrupt in XYZ manners and in XYZ ways. And he cannot sue them for that because it's said in Parliament. And then a newspaper could quote that because it was said in Parliament. They aren't quoting it as their statement on their own. They could quote it and send it out to the public there, further ridiculing Mr. Griffith. And then I could come here on YouTube or on TikTok and quote from that newspaper article, further ridiculing Mr. Griffith. And he cannot sue over any of that because it was protected. The original statement would have been protected by privilege, and all everyone else is doing is just quoting that original statement. And that is the problem he has there. I understand that problem. If an investigation was launched by the parliament, not by the parliament, sorry, by politicians, by the government, by the prime minister, and they don't have the permission to do that, and it could be assumed that bad faith is involved in the investigation, you would not want the results of that investigation being publicized in an arena where someone cannot have any legal recourse. So you didn't have the permission to launch this investigation. You still launched it. Now, if you did lie about me in the investigation, now I cannot sue about it. Everyone has to assume it's true because it was said in Parliament. You understand why that would sound unfair? I understand the lawsuit. Now, we would see where this lawsuit all leads. As of now, the judge is telling them to try and discuss something among themselves. The government side is saying that they have given assurances that they will not be releasing it to the public, but the former commissioner and his lawyers aren't too happy with those assurances. We'll see what more the government can do, possibly, to allay his fears. But it's not only in that issue where we are seeing some questions about how do we hold police accountable, because I am sure that is the framing that the government, that the prime minister may have for what he's doing with that firearm user license audit and investigation. He is trying to hold police, the law enforcement agencies, accountable for their bad actions, and understandable. But the problem is in that issue, and even others, as we are going to see now, how exactly do we legally hold police accountable? And should we be better structuring laws to allow for that to happen? Cops may have to pay personally for malicious prosecutions. The government is considering whether to make police officers personally liable for payment of damages in malicious prosecution cases. Attorney General Reginald R. Moore said on Tuesday that the Office of the Attorney General had been in ongoing consultations with the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and the Ministry of National Security on the issue of errant police officers being held personally liable for damages awarded in malicious prosecution cases. Speaking in the Senate, Amos said the Ministry of the Attorney General held a meeting with the Police Complaints Authority and the TTPS on March 3rd to discuss amendments to the Police Complaints Authority Act. He said at the meeting the proposal to amend the State Liability and Proceedings Act was briefly mentioned, and he spoke about the fact that they were looking at Australian law, and possibly, I believe, in the state of Victoria over in Australia, they're looking at some of their laws that allow on certain cases where the police have been deemed to be too errant, the payment comes out of their own pockets. And that sounds very tempting, especially if you read a story like the one I covered in the live not too long ago. Judicial error cost state $200,000. Now, this story is a bit lengthy. We aren't going to read through the entire thing. If you were in the live, you would have been familiar. The man, a man from Diego Martin, was maliciously prosecuted. The police were hunting the man apparently. They stole multiple times, multiple items, cash, jewelry. They stole things from him. The people who stole from him were found to be, an investigation was launched, and basically they were found guilty, as guilty is found in the police service, and I believe nothing came of that issue in the long run. All that happened is he was freed after a lengthy period of time, being caught and trapped in the court system. He was allowed out after a lengthy period of time, and a lawyer happened to hear about his case, took his case on pro bono, free, and that's how he was able to fight this and eventually get the $200,000 over the malicious prosecution. It was settled there. But the problem there is the $200,000 that is being paid isn't being paid by the police, the officers who purposefully went out of their way to maliciously prosecute this man, to to charge this man with charges that he wasn't guilty of, to arrest this man to steal his goods. Shouldn't the police be the ones that pay in a case like that? Now, the police service obviously have something to say about that, the regular officers. TTPSSWA, what about doctors, judges, and ministers? What about doctors, judges, and ministers? The Police Association responds to plans to make officers liable for malicious prosecutions. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service Social and Welfare Association is telling the government to stop using police officers as a soft target. This is in response to revelations by Attorney General. We know what those revelations are. In a WhatsApp message to Guardian Media, the President, Gideon Dixon, asked if such a move would be similar to doctors, judges, and ministers. We are the enforcers of the law and agents of the state as above. Hence, don't consider piecemeal law. Legislate for all. All right. Here's the thing. I don't know if I disagree with that. He does have a good point. If you are involved in making decisions on behalf of the state, we're not talking about mistakes. We're talking about if you do something maliciously, if you do something purposefully errant, then I think you should be paying the consequence of that, even for doctors, judges, and ministers. And the thing is, in that very same $200,000 case, where they call it, in the article, they call it a judicial error costs the state that $200,000, even in that very same article, it was the judge, the magistrate involved in that put the man into prison wrongly. He went to the appeal court. The man won his appeal in the appeal court. And the magistrate who initially placed him in prison wrongly, and the appeal was won and reversed that decision, the magistrate still, after the man was found, after the case was thrown out by the appeal court, the magistrate still issued the warrant to commit the man to prison. The magistrate. So in a case, and that magistrate, by the way, went on to serve in the industrial court. That same magistrate is currently serving in Trinidad and Tobago's industrial court. Not a cent would be docked from his pay. He isn't losing anything because of this, but should he be? If the police involved in a case like this should also have to pay, shouldn't the judges too? I kind of like that idea, where anyone involved, if you do wrong, you have to pay. I really don't like the idea that there are some members in society that do indeed seem above the law. They aren't punished the same as the rest of the society, politicians included, ministers included, as the Police Welfare Association did point out. Ministers, when they engage in wrongdoing, their punishment is they may lose their ministerial portfolio, but they don't go to jail. They don't lose any money. They just, someone might vote them out. They might be put into another ministry. That shouldn't be. Judges, a judge has to basically commit a crime at prime time on live record for something serious to happen to them. One of the judges involved in the case, I believe that was with the whole Piarco incident, where a government was in Trinidad and Tobago, along with some of their friends, were engaged in some serious theft. And quite a few of the people on the stealing side of that in the United States, they have already been found guilty and served their prison sentences, and some of them are already out. While in Trinidad and Tobago, because in some cases of judicial mistakes, some of these guys are just out here living their lives normally. So in a case like that, where in one of those Piarco cases, it was basically thrown out because of some of the nonsense one of the judges did. And I think he is now deceased and he doesn't have to worry about that anymore. But in a case like that, shouldn't a judge have some consequence to pay? If there isn't any serious consequence for a judge, then there isn't a serious motivation for a judge not to behave badly. What is the extreme consequence that a judge has to face to make sure they don't behave badly? That's the whole idea in society of the law enforcement arm and the judicial arm, is so that the society understands if you do certain wrong things here, there are consequences to pay. Now, what happens if some people in the society are given the impression that they don't have consequences to pay if they break those laws? Isn't that kind of encouragement for them to break laws more often? What do you think? Drop a comment, tell me what you think. That's all I have for now. I hope you're educated, informed, or entertained. And tell me, who should watch The Watchmen and who should have permission to watch The Watchmen? Drop a comment, tell me what you think, and I will see you in the next video.